Hello everyone, this is Jose Mokhtarzadeh and you're watching my program on strategy. The world is changing fast these days, especially during pandemic, right? We probably need to adjust our strategies in life or our career. So I just ask experts about their strategies following pandemic or during pandemic. Today, I would like to introduce you to Associate Professor Majid Warkiani from School of Biomedical Engineering, the University of Technology, Sydney. He received his PhD in mechanical engineering from Nanyang Technological University, NTU, under the prestigious SINGA scholarship from ASTAR and undertook postdoctoral training at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. He is NHMRC-CD fellow and also a member of Institute for Biomedical Materials and Devices and Center for Health and Technologies at UTS. Welcome, Majid.
Hello, Hussein. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks.
Good. How are you? Good. Thanks. How's life these days during pandemic?
Well, it's strange, I would say. So we try to cope with all the closures at uni, and then trying to adapt ourselves to the new lifestyle. So it's a bit weird, but we're getting there. So far so good.
Oh, that's good. So you guys are still going to uni or not?
Yes. Really? Look, uni is I would say is officially closed, but they're trying to get back to normal slowly. There are some strategy in place, but my lab just had a special permission to be open during the pandemic.
Cool.
To just do some experiment for the testing that we were developing here.
So you guys are working also on COVID-19 as well, right?
Yes, we do.
So Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so from the day one when this is started, so everybody was talking about testing, rapid testings, how these things can be implemented. And I'm sure in the past few months, you have heard lots of news and development and all those emergency approvals that FDA gave to a couple of companies. That has been our target too. So as you might know, probably when somebody is diagnosed, somebody want to get a testing done these days, typically either you need to go to a clinics to these walkthrough drive-away centers that they are placed in different locations in the city. They collect a sample from your throat. It's called swapping samples, and they send it to a centralized laboratory to get the testing done, and typically turnaround is 2 to 3 days. So there's a lot of logistics around it, and of course, waiting times can be essentially not pleasant for many people. They wanted to get the result fast, and at the same time, that period of waiting, if somebody is potentially positive, can be dangerous because there is a risk of transferring the virus to other people. So the whole idea was to how we can build a rapid and accurate test. And if I want to talk about a little bit technically here, so technically the accurate tests are those tests that they are based on a molecular analysis where you get the virus RNA out, and through a process called PCRs, you do the precise detection. There was a lot of news around this antibody type test that you can do the testing at home. Those things are still under evaluation, and to get the result from them, it needs that somebody be infected and already cured, and after a few days you can get the result. So essentially, those rapid antibody tests cannot detect an active viral load in a person who's currently. So what was our idea, and many other people around the world idea, to shorten that 2 to 3 days turnaround to 1 hour, 2 hours if possible. And that's where we try to build this Labonachip test that integrates sample collection, extraction, PCR, and everything, and shrink the time in a way that you could see the results in 30 minutes to 1 hour.
So basically, for those people who may not be familiar with microfluidic or on the lab on the chip, so you mean that you bring all these technologies into a microscopic basically
exactly
level? Okay.
Exactly. So all those equipments that requires in the lab, that from the moment the sample come, the saliva or the swab samples come, we need to do the virus concentration, RNA extraction, then put it into a centrifuges, multi-step centrifugation, and then put it to a special chemicals to do the DNA preparation, replication, and the detection. Those things are all time consuming and bulky.
Of course, yeah.
And these days there is a lot of technologies which is called lab on a chip or microfluidics, where you can shrink those platforms and machineries into a small components and have a desktop platforms where you can essentially think of doing all those multiple steps in a single device. And there are plenty of them already available in the market for a variety of application. But what we were trying to do with the specific test to be done for the COVID-19, our particular interest is actually in airports, because we are in touch with the government to see how we can implement, if they want to open the borders, and how fast we can screen passengers that they are going into an airplane or coming off an airplanes to get into our cities,
Right.
how fast we can get them tested. So the
That's
idea is
right.
that to have a very quick, accurate test in place in airports and hotels, for example.
So how fast are we now, and where are you guys?
Oh, I can say there are currently FDA cleared couple of these technologies, similar things we are doing back in US, which can do it as little as 20 minutes to 30
Wow.
minutes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so these are like really implemented, so everyone, like hospitals or governments, can really.
Oh, yes, yes. No,
Or
this
FDA approved.
technology is already out there. So, I mean, everyone, I don't know, these are essentially countries typically at this situation try to keep the tax for themselves. I mean, buying this type of technologies, I don't know how fast it can be. But the good thing is that we are developing these things for Australian ecosystem too. So soon, through us or other people's, these things will be available. So I'm
So
not
when you
worried
say
about that.
when you say ecosystem, you mean that it has to be implemented within Australia in a certain
Yeah,
way?
yeah. So we have our own regulations, and
I
at the
see,
same time, all these
like a
things should,
TGA type.
yeah, exactly, should be regulated and then tested to be sure everything is accurate and precise. And then, there is a lot of interest from the government body to get these things in action and in place in the near future when they are planning to open the country and open the borders. Yeah.
So can you make it like 2 minutes?
No, not. I mean that's where you are biologically limited, because you're limited with certain chemical reaction that
Yep.
needs time to happen to get that sensitivity. But I would say for the case of airport, as soon as you get out of an airplane, you imagine that all the passengers do the samples, like the cabin crew do the sample collection in airplane, and as soon as passengers come out, all those
Right,
things that they
right.
have tags get, by the time that you are doing your checking and luggage collection, before that or after that, you can get the results, and then
Oh,
there will be
right, right.
procedures after that. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good idea. So is there any, like, if you think like out of the box, is there any other methodologies like none? This is kind of invasive, so you have to really get the saliva and then get it tested. But is there
Uh,
any other non-invasive method that
well, I don't know. We can call saliva collection invasive or not.
is not?
If it was a blood or anything
Right.
else, you could have said that. But saliva is fairly easy. So essentially, you can think of putting a little cotton piece in your mouth, and
Mm-mm.
then it collect the saliva. Then you get the cotton out and put it inside this platforms to do the testing. So I would say it's non-invasive, certainly, but doing it other way around, yes, there are other ways to think of, including those, as I said, antibody type tests. But antibody tests that they call it serology tests, they are they don't indicate the active infection. They indicate typically past infection, means that you have had the virus and you might get cures, but the trace of the antibody is present in your body. So that's why we need this type of fast molecular test in place to be sure that somebody is not carrying the virus and coming to the society.
Right, right. So where are we? Where are we with your technology now? So
So
when you say,
we are doing the last bit. So the we have a I don't know. We are lucky in Australia that we could keep the numbers down. Now
yep,
we got stuck with a scenario of we don't have actual samples in hands to do the validation. So
maybe we should.
yeah, so
You
we
can
are.
come here to Victoria.
Oh yeah, probably that's what I should do. So we managed to get some samples from a hospital here in
Right.
Sydney when they were collecting the patient. Those are frozen viral samples. Again, that's one issue. The second issue is working with any type of. My laboratory essentially is a technology laboratory. It was not designed to work with the viruses, which requires very sophisticated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we had a hard time of finding proper location to do this validation. So I would call it logistics issues rather than technologies issue. Technology is
Right.
there, but we are trying to do our best to essentially make this happen. But we are lucky that a lots of people around the world are already thinking the same way and helping to push this forward faster. So I'm confident that very soon as we get a better idea about the evolution of this virus and how the other countries are doing, these things will be in place.
Right,
So
right.
in airports and in different locations that
That's
requires
right.
rapid screening. Yep.
That's right. So it's actually amazing. So you you guys didn't work on any like this type of viruses or any similar type, right? Before pandemic. So this wasn't an opportunity or something that you guys felt like, oh, it's needed, and then it started, right?
Exactly. So I mean, we historically do research on cancer, and mainly we are working, of course, with the cancer patients. But the scenario of detecting something or building a POCT to essentially pick up minute quantities of like a DNA or RNA from a body fluid like a blood, saliva, urine is almost the same. Of course, we never do research on the viruses and anything like that, but we realize that we need to adjust ourselves. Now is the time to do and use your expertise to do this stuff. And there was a call from the NSW government to push this thing. So we realized that when we have the expertise and equipments and tools in hand, we should probably contribute.
Oh, well done. Yeah, it's amazing. So people like yourself, really making a big impact, these days, because it was unprecedented. So none of us basically expected such a thing before that. We discussed before we start this interview. So maybe coming back to adjusting, before that. So you were very successful in academic. You became associate professor in a very short period of time, and you're publishing in a great journals and getting great grants. And so you had this kind of strategy for yourself, right? That used to work. And then after pandemic, do you think they're gonna adjust, or you just can keep going the same way?
Well, to be honest, I would say the pandemic, at least it didn't affect my group because I believe that when you're working with enthusiastic people that have energy to do the science for the sake of science and for promoting it and building something useful and impactful, pandemics wouldn't stop you, or unless you wanted to stop working or you're looking for excuse. At least this is not the case for my group here. So I'm lucky that I'm working with a bunch of young scientists that they are ambitious and they are here to learn something and to do something. And I could say majority of them came to work during this pandemic, despite all those problems that we had, and we managed to keep pushing the works that we have been doing. Success, I don't know how we can define a success, but I always had the ambitions to do more things and learn new stuff. That's my ideal things, and I feel that for this short period of time that we have for living, especially when you are young and you have energy, you should do as much as you can to build a good career, to build a good networks, to essentially contribute to the society that we live. We're very lucky to live, to be honest, here in Australia and especially Sydney. I've been fortunate to be supported very well by my senior academics and dean and the head of schools, and I feel kind of obligated. So when we have the opportunity to be productive, why not? So that's
Excellent.
typically the pathway that
Of
I always
course,
have in mind. Yeah.
that's excellence and humble, of course. That's, of course, you're achieving a lot. So it's amazing. Well done. So you're maybe you can tell us a little bit about an associate professor's daily routine. I'm
Okay.
sure a lot of people want to hear about, like, what is this like? What's it like to be a professor?
Okay. So okay, I can get a print screen of my calendar
Yeah,
probably. I
maybe you
send
can
it to
share
you.
it for a sec.
So see
No,
how
that's
many
fine.
how many. So typically for me is a lots of management. So
I see.
managing time is just really matters here. I myself at least have at least 20 people currently working with me in my group, from postdocs to PhDs and a few capstones and undergraduate students, and variety of projects we're handling. So I mean, for me, the the busiest things is to juggle from one projects to another projects, which might not really be connected together, but I need to be on top of that scientifically. I know what is the state of the art, what is happening, what is my student is producing, and then giving advice to all the students, meeting them on a daily basis, all these ad hoc meetings popping up in my office every minute coming ask questions, plus all the logistics of purchasing consumables and equipments and making sure the lab is functional. Writing grants probably, is the major part of my life that I need to constantly think of money for the next projects and continuation. And at the same time, safety and health-being of the people who are working around,
Yep.
especially during this time, I
Yeah.
need to be worried. So it takes a lot of my time. So typically I wake up 6 a.m. and I work until 11 p.m. When I say work, it means that I at least charge my mobile 2 or 3 times per day because it's
Wow,
always
that's
around low in
odd.
battery. Yeah, it means that how much I'm using it per day.
Right, right.
But it's enjoyable. So it's enjoyable because whenever I'm thinking of some people like probably Bob Langer,
Yeah, of course.
how during the day he managed to control variety of things and running such a big group, such a successful academics and many entrepreneurial activity that he's involved and he's doing. I always will feel that okay, I'm not doing much compared to him. So there is
Of
more way
course.
to go.
Yeah, if
So
you have Bob Langer as a role model, so
yeah,
you always need to run.
yeah, he has been at least for the past, I would say 7 to 8 years that I had the privilege to know him and in Boston meeting him a couple of times.
Mm,
He has been my role models, and I always share the same stories with my students and say, look, I mean, there is no limit
yep.
for human, and if you want to, whenever you get tired or you feel that you achieved a lot, take a look at this guy and see how humble he is
Yeah,
with
yeah,
all
yeah.
these achievements. That's probably a good things to have. I mean, I believe all of us are ideologists. So right, so you liked it to you always liked it to be like someone. That's at least have been the case for
Mm-hmm.
many people. And when you find a good role model for yourself, you never get tired, I would say. And there is always energy, there is always motivation, and there is always ambitious to grow. And you should never put um, people around yourself that you see that if you're compared to your colleagues A and B, you're producing 2 times more, 3 times more, that's enough. That's, I would say, not acceptable, at least for my case. I always say there are top peoples that um, you can compare yourself with, and I would say if they can achieve it, why not me?
Why not me? Oh, that's amazing. It's really interesting to listen to someone like yourself who's really achieving a lot, and how you manage these things. It's well done. And especially during this time, many people actually are kind of struggling as well, right? So there are not only that's in academia, people, you are hearing a lot of people are losing their jobs and stuff. Um, and we were talking just before this interview that you were mentioning how the opportunities are also happening around biotech or any new things that we really need around COVID. So what do you want to what do you have to say to those people or even governments? Like how can we, because there are lots of things that we can do
Mhm.
and there aren't jobs. So it seems that there's something wrong here.
That's correct. So look, I mean, the reality is that this is the numbers that I said to my student. Is typically 90 to 95% of the words are always users, and
Mm,
there are few percent of the people in the world who are running the world. That's the reality.
yep.
Consider it from a big organization like a Microsoft's or Apple's,
Amazon. Yep.
Google's, anything like Amazon. There are bright mind peoples which hires other bright mind peoples
Yep.
to run a big organization, but it doesn't mean that from that big organization everybody's contributing. So uh, I would say the government should do the same. Or government, what the best things that they can do, which I'm sure they are doing here, they need to have in place bright minds that that essentially help them to take the right decision, right investment, right strategies. That's my suggestion. I believe they are doing it okay, but they definitely need to be opportunistic because whenever there is a trouble or problem, there is opportunity on after that. And I believe this pandemics created tremendous amount of opportunity for Australia and New Zealand, just because of the geographically being isolated. While for many years it was a disadvantage, I would say during this pandemic was an advantage for us. And now that we are a kind of safe haven for many people, we should leverage on it and build our economy around that. And given that we are a big continent with which can be used and utilized in a great way, while we can help a lots of talented people from different parts of the world to come here to help us with that motivation, in which the Canada apparently is doing that. Uh, by the time that we see a lots of problems happening in USR, I believe the Prime Minister of Canada is pretty smart and is taking a lot of wise action in terms of a new type of permanent residency, attracting talents, et cetera, to Canada to build a good system of the entrepreneurship. And I hear a lot of good news. And in fact, a couple of my friends recently migrated there just because of very ease of easing the rules in terms of entrepreneurial activities. So during this pandemics, I believe, as we discussed before, we got a couple of big lessons in how vulnerable can human be. Essentially, by the fact that we have a lots of technology in place, we still can hit hard by an invisible enemy, as Donald Trump said.
In the
And
micro level, micro level.
Exactly. And then how we can essentially convert this threat into opportunities to build next gen platforms to be there. I believe medical research Australia has been the frontiers and can be much better in the front line if government invest more. And at the end of the days, there would be lots of opportunity for manufacturing, bringing the job back to Australia. It's very unfortunate to see a lots of layoffs and then people who lost their jobs. But I would say with a proper decision and investment in a matter of a year or two, all these people can get back to works. A lots of foreign investment can be diverted to Australia just because of the benefits that we can offer here. And we can have a very prosperous society if really we want to.
Awesome.
And
yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So something came to my mind because you're mentioning about like what government can do. So imagine you are Scott Morrison now, okay? What are the top 3 things you would do in the next year or so?
Well, first of all, it's a hard question. I'm sure he have in his advisory board a lots of talented peoples. But again, what he needs to do is advice from people who are in front line of the research, at least at the university levels, at the CSIRO, which is a very big body of the government, to see how they can invest properly in technologies and talents that we have plenty of them in Australia, to essentially enable them to generate jobs. Because his biggest challenge is now how to create jobs.
Yep.
Many jobs essentially are lost just because they are useless these days. So when you can see Qantas laying off 6,000 people today because people are not using airplane, why those people should be hired? That makes sense. But it doesn't mean that poor people should be jobless for the next year or two. That's the strategy of the government, should be how we can convert such a trained group of peoples to come to other sectors and contribute. Again, because each country and each administration is in shock these days of post-pandemics, how to recover.
Exactly.
The biggest challenge, how to keep the society safe. I would say we should give it a time to Scott Morrison and his team to think well through. But if 5 years later from now, you and me talk and we come and say, hey, country A, for example, Singapore, or country B, South Korea, took the advantage of the pandemic and invested in this and this and this, and now they see the fruits and we don't get anything, that's really bad for us.
Right.
That's something that we should really be worried from now if we go that way.
That's right. How about higher education? How do you see that?
Well, I would say there would be a lot of changes, definitely. The way that higher education essentially it used to be around the world, it would have been changed. And there would be some interest definitely from people who like to just do the higher education for the sake of mingling around with the talents, learn something new, and essentially do entrepreneurial activities. There will be some changes around that. In terms of the way that we are educating next generation peoples, I would say there will be drastic changes in undergrad programs. Majority of things definitely will continue to be online, and unnecessary attendance in campuses will be there, and then we need to cope with that. But the infrastructures that we have, the buildings that we have, the beautiful laboratories that we have, all of them can be converted to become a work horse for essentially entrepreneurial activity, as I said. These things can be easily rented out to the startups, to the companies, to be utilized by talented peoples to build products, the new generation of the devices, as we discussed. So many things can be done, to be honest. It's just a matter of how to managing it properly and how to essentially complying with that. I know it's hard, but the reality is there. Is we need to be flexible to the changes, and the people who are embracing it faster and sooner, there are people who are more successful. Yeah.
It's all about agility, right? If you can be
Exactly.
agile and you can maneuver quite fast. If you're stiff, there's a chance of breaking. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not going to work. So what is? I would love to continue, but I know that you have a meeting soon after this. But I have just a couple of questions, and then we will wrap it up. So what was you talked a lot about like industry as well? You know how people can convert these amazing things that we have, like our labs and laboratories everywhere in our universities. So you also work a lot with industry, all right?
Yeah.
So what are the challenges or highlights these days that you guys discuss with your industry partners?
So surprisingly, what I saw is that in the private sector, I didn't see much of layoffs or shutdowns. At least the biotech industry that I've been working, including like a stem cell industry here in Sydney with one or two companies we're working, the medical devices like a Cochlear and ResMed. I've seen actually the boom in their works and in their production and the way that they are actively involved. So probably other industry hit. I'm not aware of that, but I could see a boom in the construction industry. The number of buildings is kept growing as government wisely was supporting this industry because it created a lot of jobs. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of interest now for formation of new startups around biotechs, and a lot of people's desperately looking for government bodies to support them with the loans and the grants and things like that to could initiate the work. Some people were planning things in their mind. Now they are really in a good position to shape it and make it happen. And I believe that's a good opportunity that government, with a small amount of money, invest in a stuff that one day can be multi-million-dollar companies. Again, as I said, being in a university ecosystem, as you are yourself, we are not short of talented people or people with good ideas. We are in short of probably a right management and how to utilize those talents, and at the same time steering that entrepreneurial activity to become more productive. One of the sad things that I've seen in the past 6 years in Australia is that whenever I saw a good Australian scientist which has a good idea, do a little bit of work, and then take off his idea and go to the Bay Area in US and make it that happen there. I've seen a lots of them. In fact, one of my students who moved last year there, he told me just in San Francisco, there is over 10,000 Australians that they have companies and startup. Yep. That's a lot. That's a lot. So he said that there is a community that we always hang out. And I said, what if half of those people would have stayed here? Yep. Would have been stayed here. They took their company and the startups here and make happen. There could be a lots of job creation. Government, I'm sure they know these things and I've seen this stuff. But if not now, to stop it and prevent that brain drain that everybody is talking about, at least in the third world countries, we should not let that happen in Australia. And I guess if we change certain stuff, we can definitely gain much more down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree. We both have been to the States, so we know that the culture there and the culture here, maybe part of it is kind of cultural. That I would love to learn more about this as well. That's why we started this type of discussions, and understand this. And if we can, because sometimes it's just a matter of simply changing the direction slightly, and then you see that, wow, cool. Of course, we don't have that number of people like population-wise in the States because they have the big market. So sometimes because of that, people move to that country or even European countries. Here we have 20 million, and if you have a technology, you probably can't, have that big market. But overall, we can be. I believe we are really up.
That's right. That's right. I mean, one thing that can certainly should change is the mentality of the investment and venture capitals, which is the key driving factor for many people to move to US, because essentially the ecosystem of Bay Area at least is like this, that there are millions of them who are desperately looking to invest in ideas, and they don't scare of taking risk. Essentially, there is a saying in the Bay Area, say we don't invest in the people or in a company who has failed one or two times. They essentially embrace failure and
Yeah, very
try to
easily. Yeah.
support. Yeah, but here I myself have been at least pitching to multiple VCs for the technologies that we are developing. That at least for one of them, we ended up moving to China, is just because of the fact there are people who doesn't know what venture capital means. To be honest, they're always looking for like a safe scenarios of investment. That's something that government can essentially contribute, and
Right, right.
by generating new type of investments, and or even changing the mentality of the VCs or the way that they are lending their loans or the cash to the young peoples, we could have changed that. That can be one thing, and lots of other incentives like a cash incentives, tax incentive,
Yep,
etc.,
yep,
which are
yep.
available in US and other countries. We can easily implement it here,
Definitely.
and
Yeah.
and in a short term, we could see a boom of ideas and technologies in Australia too.
I do agree, Majid. Yeah, this is actually, I think our discussion just began, but but
Yeah.
maybe next time we get together again, because I know you have to go. But maybe my last question I would ask you before we leave is, who would you like to ask some of these questions, and get their insight? Is there
Like,
anyone that you have in mind that you really want to sit down and ask some of these questions and get some insight?
well, I like to see well, I don't know what they call it in a Scott Morrison team, but I want to see who is the scientific director of the Scott Morrison team. Essentially, who is taking strategic decisions for the government body, how the money should be invested, and what are the risk factors that they have in mind.
Are you
And
talking about ARC type of things or not bigger
well,
than
yeah,
that?
ARC, and HMRC are essentially two
Two
big
bodies of
body of the
funding. Yeah.
government, right? But I just want to give you an examples. The total budget of ARC and HMRC is around $2 billion per
Two
year.
billion, yeah, around that.
And
Yeah.
Singapore, and how many universities we have is around, I don't know, 100 university with thousands of good researchers. Singapore has essentially 2 to 3 university, and their budget of research is around 20-25 billion dollar per year.
Wow.
So just to scale it, the way that invest in their research and their entrepreneur activity, etc., with their size and capacity, the way, and our GDP is definitely much bigger. Our resources is much bigger. We have
We are
more
20
stuff.
million. There are 5 million, right? How many?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. They are around 5 to 6 million, right? So that's the same apply for Korea, right? South Korea, the way
Yep.
that invest. I just want to see those people who are taking the
Mm,
decisions, and
mm.
they're certainly aware of that. And then when government is willing to make such investments during the pandemic, and as you say, having a surplus of $70 billion somehow at the middle of the night, why we cannot revert those things, and why we do not save this ecosystem, which can pay off 100 times more if you invest properly in it.
Exactly, exactly. No, that's totally right. I think it's amazing to hear. I think all the scientists or people who can make an impact, who can have an impact, and we have a lot of them around, basically. And it's this talent should be taken advantage. At least take advantage. We're not saying that
Exactly.
not use it. So at least take advantage. And they're ready. They're ready. I remember that you guys are working a lot on the COVID. Remember when the pandemic began, so from the hospitals, they were coming to us, asking some questions about like 2D printing and stuff. And I noticed like in one Zoom meeting, I probably have said somewhere else, it was like 60 people from the head of department, from school, head, and from because they wanted to contribute. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? So it means that there are a lot of, talents and motivation, but it needs direction. And of course,
Exactly. Exactly. That's true. I hope we see the good days, and
we do,
and really see the changes happening. That's we always stay optimistic. That's
of
why we love
course.
this country and become Australian. And definitely, I would say this is a very, very right time for
Exactly.
Australia to be a global leader in different aspects.
That's definitely right. Thank you very much, Majid. Anything else that you wanted me to ask
No,
you? That all
no,
good?
that was great chatting with you, Hussein, after a while, and
Definitely.
thanks for
Sure.
inviting me. Keep up your
Pleasure.
good show and good
Thank
works,
you. Thank you
and
very
lovely to
much.
talk to you soon again.
Thank you. Definitely, definitely. Thank you very much, Majid. I just talked to Majid Warkiani from Sydney, UTS, and it was amazing to hear from him all the regarding COVID and what's happening, about the strategies that we can take, about what's basically we can, or academics or people who can make an impact are offering to governments, and how they can work together. Thanks a lot, Majid. Good
Pleasure,
night.
Wasinjan. Have a good evening. Bye.